chain that is being implemented by the government since December 2023. Milei's administration is trying to do and is actually carrying out the setting of the grounds under which the private sector, which is the only generator of wealth in the economy, it will be the one to be the main actor. So the only thing we can do in this context is to create those conditions. And how can we create conditions that will be lasting in time? Well, originally, through our stabilization plan, the one we designed and have been implementing from December, is trying to get Argentina to achieve something it has never achieved in its history, is to have financial and fiscal surplus that will last over time. And this is because throughout our history, we had 112 years of fiscal deficit. So if we had continued to walk that path, we would going to have more of the same. And for many decades, Argentina, instead of attacking the cause of the problem that was fiscal deficit, attacked the consequences. And what were the consequences of fiscal deficit? Well, we spent more than what we were able to earn. And how could we solve that? Well, we did this by taking debt. We took out loans, and when the lending sources were depleted, we used defaults to correct this. We did this 9 times over our history, and then we went to the Treasury for financing. Simply said, we turned on the money printing machine. When money issuance caused inflation, then we set up price controls. And when we run out of reserves, we set up foreign currency controls and limitations. And this aggravated over the past decades. And every time we would find a more creative solution to our problems and never attack the root cause, which always was the fiscal deficit. And this administration is completely committed to removing fiscal deficit once and for all. And because of our history, our credibility, our policymaker credibility in Argentina is very limited. The trustworthiness of our word is very limited. So what we've designed and implemented is a plan that must naturally produce concrete results and fast results. At the beginning of our administration, we said that we were going to achieve financial and fiscal deficit by 2024. Economic agents would look at us hard and say, well, we will see if that happens. So we need to show this, prove this with results so as to generate credibility. And that is why we designed a plan that would remove fiscal and quasi-fiscal deficit fast, that would produce fast concrete results. And designing that plan had to do with certain characteristics that are not conspicuous to a normal onlooker, but that will lead to the success of the plan. One of the things we know from the very first moment was that to have fast, concrete results, we could not depend on the passage of a law at Congress. We could not depend on agreements with the provinces to carry out these actions. We had to show fast results, and we had to remove fiscal deficit fast as well. And we did this. During the first month of operations, we achieved financial equilibrium, which was unheard of. And this, our history, which leads to skepticism, makes this skepticism to become doubt and lack of commitment. So we have to double our efforts to achieve the results. Well, then we were in January, in February, in March, April, and this is like the San Fermin song. So we got to have financial surplus, which is more important than primary surplus because the financial surplus takes into account the payment of interest on debt. So Argentina is going through an unprecedented moment in its history. There is no record in Argentina of having financial surplus for a long period of time. And we are doing this in such a way uh, that has led us to design a plan where the income, the revenue from which has increased temporarily, had to be had to strike a balance with our expenditure because due to our social situation, we could not have just expenditure cuts, but we're going on that path. We're walking the path of having primary surplus, of having financial surplus. And why is it so important to have this? Well, because since we don't have the, because people don't believe in our words, we have to prove this with facts. We have to set up very good, very productive laws, but we also need solid grounds behind them, solid reasons, because otherwise the law turns unenforceable. So it is very important to understand that over the past 6 months, we have not only achieved financial and fiscal surplus, but also commercial trade surplus, current account surplus, energy surplus, and all of this for the first time in many, many years. So this is the first time that Argentina has a financial surplus without it being in default. This is actually true. And this is not fully grasped by all economic agents. And why is this? Because of our past history. So we have to constantly insist on saying that fiscal surplus is an unnegotiable aspect of our economic plan. Because once our accounts are in order, everything will follow. So I don't want to forget anything. Well, we um, removed 5 points of fiscal deficit, 10 points of financial deficit. An important part of our stabilization plan was the elimination of quasi-fiscal deficit, which has to do with the interest-bearing liabilities that the central bank had to pay, which led to monetary expansion. We eliminated this initially through a negative real rate, contrary to everything that orthodox economists were saying, which would have led us to increase the pace of inflation. And then when we got to manageable levels, there was a transfer of this type of debt of the central bank to the treasury. And then there was the complete elimination of interest-bearing liabilities through the liquidity bills, the LEFI, which for a month now have been operating. In this regard, we have also carried out two main actions, which has to do with our international commercial relations, which was settling the import debt that we had to international importers in a context in which we had no reserves. We inherited only 12, well, we had a negative 12 billion reserves, and we had an import debt equal to $60 billion in addition to that. And we gradually solved this in such a way that even though we had no reserves at the time, and trusting that the solution that we could provide and that we could actually fulfill We first, from 12 December 2023, we freed the commercial flow. We kept the commercial stock we had, and what we did was generate through these instruments known as Popreal, central bank bills, was a forward dollar bill sale. And in this regard, we were able to provide foreseeability to importers that had problems with their suppliers so as to solve this problem. So we not only gave foreseeability to the situation, which is very important for investments and for planning, but we also gave transparency, which was very important for a sector that was completely corrupted by previous practices. Many of the firms that you represent here have suffered those practices in the past, and we came here to put an end to that. So it is very important, not just that concept, but also what we removed a few weeks ago, which is another source of monetary expansion that has to do with the use of puts sold to banks. So currently, we have a central bank whose balance sheet is in order. We have fiscal surplus. We don't have funding needs precisely because of this financial surplus we have. The financial surplus guarantees that we can pay interest on debt because every month we are generating one or 1.5 billion pesos in surplus, which are accumulated to pay interest. And what this leads to is to a very significant reduction in inflation. And we have an issue here with expectations and reality. Expectations, once again, because of the skepticism and our previous history, well, people say, let us see if they can do this. Let us see if they can do this fast. They have other doubts, and these are all the logical, questions they may have. And we are in an Argentine context where in 112 years of our previous 123 years, we have been doing things wrongly. So in this regard, it is important to ratify what we're doing, because this mismatch between expectations and reality, how do we measure this? Because it turns from a sensation into a fact. So how we measure this is that from the beginning, the inflation expectations for this program were 50 percentage points above what turned out to be their real points. It's like a weather forecast that said today it was going to rain. There had million of weather forecasts that said that it was going to rain, but there was no rain ultimately. So we were able to reduce inflation faster than the market thought. And what this leads to is to an issue where the expectations do not match reality as soon as they were thought to, and it is difficult to get an equilibrium. So Argentina is now working the path of putting its accounts in order, to putting the balance sheet of the central bank in order, and that leads to killing inflation. Our main priority is to eliminating inflation, because the inflation tax is the worst tax of all for our people. So let us understand this concept very properly, because that's where we're going to. And why does fiscal surplus relates to everything else we're doing? Well, because we're not comfortable with this level of fiscal surplus, not in nominal terms. We're going to insist on having a fiscal surplus, but we're going to have to do this by reducing expenditure with a continued reduction in expenditure, as stated in the May Pact signed in July in Tucumán, which aims at expenditure being 25% of the GDP and not 40%, 35 at this point, or 40 or 42 as we used to have. So in this context, the fiscal surplus and the actions we have taken provide a foundation for the RIGI regime. Because what the RIGI is, at the end of the day, is a large investment promotion regime that is actually a window to where we're going or where we intend to go as a country. The conditions we want to give to investors in Argentina, both foreigners and nationals. So today, these conditions, which are very beneficial, are aimed at showing that future. As the movie said, Back to the Future, we're providing the conditions that we intend for all of the economy, and we're giving them today. Can we give them these conditions? Can give everyone these conditions today? Well, we can't, because our main priority is to maintain the fiscal surplus. So we're trying to generate a virtuous circle under which projects which require a capital investment, a significant capital investment within the minimums included in the RIGI, will have these conditions, because the return on those projects generally have another characteristic, which is that they go beyond political terms. So if they go beyond political terms, then the question is, well, if you leave the administration or the previous administration comes back. And that is why we've set up this regime that we're presenting today, because it solves this situation. If we are able to maintain the fiscal surplus, as we will do, that generates growth, access to loans, economic growth, that will enable us to continue to reduce expenditure. And if we continue to reduce expenditure while we have a fiscal surplus, then there will be a reduction in tax, which is the most suffocating tool that the state has on the economy and on the private sector. So if we reduce expenditure and maintain the surplus, we will reduce tax, we will become more competitive, and we will be able to offer these conditions to the entire economy. This is why it is so important to explain the RIGI in this context. It is not an isolated project, but part of a chain, a link in a chain, in which Argentina wants to introduce itself to the world and attract capital investments so that the private sector will develop. And it will develop here, it will generate employment, wealth, returns for its shareholders, and pay taxes as well. And we will use those taxes, that tax revenue properly to generate this virtual circle and continue to withdraw from the market. And you may say, well, and if you leave or the other guys come back, what will happen? And that is why we've set up the regime. This regime has a special characteristic, and that it has consideration for the other party, and that gives a vested right for lawyers here. Well, they know what this means. This also has a third generation impact as well, which is as follows. There are many large investment promotion regimes in the world, and this is just another regime that is trying to compete for those investments. But this one, because of our previous history that we're trying to change, has additional characteristics such as access to foreign currency. The commitment to provide access to foreign currency has been thought as something as part of this virtual circle in this scheme, because as we manage to get foreign investment and there's stock in Argentina that has the right to exit Argentina as provided for in the regime, as it gives access to foreign currency to pay dividends, to pay imports. It takes it removes export import duties on capital investments. It removes the payment of export duties on the product of that investment. Those are goals that we have in the midterm for the entire economy, but we're willing to provide them today. And what this generates, well, the access to foreign currency generates something that is very interesting. For instance, those that will come after us, because we will eventually leave office, that is clear. The economic team has the second round right now, and we know there is an end to this, and we know this may raise concerns. But what happens is that the access to foreign currency will make it so that those that come after us will not be able to use currency controls against the economy as a whole, because it will have much less efficiency. If I have a stock of capital that can leave in any way, then I cannot use that tool. So they will have to find other tools. And that leads you to being required to behave in an orderly fashion in fiscal terms. So without favorable fiscal context, then there is nothing, there is no promise. So the measure of the success that of what we're doing and the administrations that come after has to be the fiscal aspect, because through fiscal surplus, we will be able to reduce expenditure and reduce taxes and provide benefits to the entire economy. So we invite you to analyze the RIGI and the other instruments and tools that we are regulating these days. The regulation on private initiative has just come out. The regulation on concessions is about to come out. We have announced privatizations as well in the official gazette. In the upcoming 6 months, we will set up the bidding process for the privatization of hydroelectrical companies. The concession, the 30-year concession of them expire in 2023. So we're going towards that destination. And this path is unrenounceable for us. And we're doing this very quickly and achieving this fast in a way that many people thought could not happen. And that leads us to our invitation to you. The natural skepticism towards Argentina because of its history makes it necessary for us to have a private sector that will commit to invest in Argentina, because that is a way to consolidate a process in which the other guys will not come back. It's as easy as that. So we all need to build this Argentina that we wish for. We can only generate the rules and conditions, and we're more than willing, and our ears are open to hear your comments on how to improve this. And we understand that if we work together, we will be able to build this very important context for Argentina. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking an interest. Thanks to all of you, to all of those who are online. And we hope this will be productive for all of you and for all of us. And we are more than willing to answer your questions. Our email is finanzas@mecon.gov.ar, finanzas@mecon.gov.ar. That's our email. If you have any questions about these regimes or any other tool. Thank you very much. This concludes the first panel, and we invite all of those present to share a coffee at the Frescoes room. We remind you that you may scan the QR code on the screen to ask questions about the RIGI, which will be answered at the end of the second panel. Thank you very much.
Manager of Investments of the Argentine Agency of Investments and International Trade, shall give the introductory remarks.
Buenos días.
Good morning. I'm Nicolás Quintana. I'm manager for investments of the Argentine Agency. I would like to say that it's an honor to be here today, being part of the organization of such a relevant seminar. It is a privilege to be here with business people and diplomatic corps that every day foster the growth of our economies. We all share the certainty of the importance of RIGI to foster investments and strengthen international trade and relations. It is very important to go deep into its scope and benefits. We have a group of experts in regulation frameworks and these incentive schemes. They, as well as the ministry, through its embassies and the agency, receive directly the investors' questions and help them in the process of fostering the economy of the country. We are convinced this is the right time to clear all doubts and to engage in a debate that is both enriching and important. It is valuable not only for us who are here today, but for all the people who are following us in all the world through Zoom, YouTube, both in Spanish and in English. Without further ado, let us start with the second panel that we will have people from legal, financial, and accounting worlds. They will provide their input regarding the RIGI. It'll be my pleasure to introduce them. As I'm mentioning you, please step in. Ramon Agote from Connoisseur Investments. Ramon is member of Connoisseur Investments. He has over 25 years of experience. He was in Merrill Lynch, and before that, he served as managing director of Global Wealth Management, being the responsible of the department in Miami. He has a degree and has a degree from the Wealth. Next, Paula Lynch. She is BDO. She has over 15 years of experience, regional leader of the BDO of the Practices of Transaction Advisory Services. She has a degree in economy with a master's of economy from SEMA and certified in exit plan in the Exit Planning Institute of the US. Has a solid background in company valuation. Sergio Cabella from Ernst & Young. He has over 30 years of experience in tax matters. He is partner of taxes of the firm and his position currently is in the area of transaction tax in Argentina. He worked over the last 20 years in due diligence. He is well known in the market as a tax referent in the area of M&A. He has an accountant degree. Alejandro Perelstein from Bruchou, Funes de Rioja. Alejandro is a partner of the Department of Bank Law and Capital Markets of Bruchou and Funes de Rioja. He has a degree in law from the University of Buenos Aires. He specializes in consulting for banks, funds, and companies. He has participated in a great number of transactions related to debt emissions, as well as financing of projects and share emissions. He has great experience in private equity, securitizations, and debt restructuring and workouts. Camila Corbalan from Becar Varela. Camila is leader of the Department of Public Affairs of the Estudio Becar Varela. She has a law degree from the University of Católica Argentina with an honor diploma. She also has a postgraduate of business law. She's very committed to gender policies, and she is very well known, and she is part of the International Women Forum and the Vital Voices Forum. Last, Jacqueline Rachel from Ernst & Young. Jacqueline is partner of Ernst & Young in the area of corporate finances and transactions for Argentina and Latin America. She has great experience in project financing and company valuations. She is a public accountant and has a degree in business administration. She has a master's in corporate finance. She also has a program, an executive program in renewable energies. Thus, we conclude the presentation of all the speakers. We thank you for your time for being here today and to Connoisseur Investments for your support in the organization of this seminar. Ramon, I give you the floor. Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you, Nicolas. It is a pleasure to moderate this panel. I will try to make it as dynamic as possible. Like the Minister of Foreign Affairs said, the boring part, we'll try to make it fun. And each and every single one of you can ask questions and we will try to answer them at the end. So we'll start with a few questions. Once again, if any of you have any questions, you can send them online. So we'll start with a small introduction, what the RIGI means to one of you, to each one of you. This is regarding the operation and the functions, its implementation and benefits. So I will ask each and every one of you if you can make a small introduction of the RIGI. Maybe you can take that mic and we can hand it over. Paula, please.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning. It is a pleasure being here, sharing this panel with you to talk about the RIGI. The RIGI regime is key for the development of the potential, economic potential of our country. Why do I say this? What is the biggest impact that the RIGI creates? What the RIGI does is to make viable investment projects that today they are not. Why do I say this? What I'm going to say to you, what I provide is a business view with a technical standpoint that impacts in the decision making. So the RIGI regime makes large projects of investments because it creates the macroeconomic context that establishes in the law. And how does this work? Well, the value of an asset of a project is defined by the funds, the flow funds, and a discount rate to define the current and therefore consider the return. The RIGI impacts positively in both variables, in the funds and in the discount rate. On the one hand, for the flows, the impact is both operational and regarding the flows for the investor. This is done through the incentives and fiscal benefits that include in the law. We can mention here the price guarantee. The law mentions not the regulation of prices, market prices. It impacts on the costs of operation through custom exemptions, the incentive to competitiveness in acquiring inputs, the possibility of deducting debits and credits 100% on account on income tax. Something that is key as well is the accelerated amortization in 2 years. It has a very strong impact on the fund flows because that is the biggest part of the investment, which is at the beginning. And then, on the other hand, it allows the deduction of the income tax, of interests, and the differences of the exchange rate that is related to the financing of these projects. Then we have the possibility of using what the project generates, because at the beginning we have the investment, and because we're talking about large investments and they are strategic, they have and they need time to start producing. Therefore, we can use these in a time frame of 5 years, or in case we don't use that, we can transfer them. Additionally, it reduces the quota of income tax from 35% to 25%. So all this creates an improvement in the flows that impacts positively in the value. And regarding the discount rate, the key impact is found in the risk and the country risk. It's a risk that defines the discount rate. Today is found at high levels above 1,000 points. That makes the discount rate so high that the value of the projects tend to zero. So the law, through the guarantees established in the norm, like legal stability for 30 years and the acknowledgement of private property ownership, this is very specific, that it establishes the solution of disputes in international organizations like the CIARI, guaranteeing this stability. Now, these factors that we take into account that makes us have a country risk that is high because of the lack of trust in the legal security of Argentina, this creates a reduction of the country risk with a convergence rate closer to countries of the region. So, thus, the positive impact of these two variables that define the viability of the project, well, that is the result. Large projects that under the macroeconomic context, the current one, were not viable, creating a return, positive return for the investors at a risk that is lower in a way. The correlation is the greater the risk, the greater the return. In this case, the return becomes positive at a relatively low risk than the one we have today. So we tested at the lab in a theoretical model, and it works. It works, and that is why we're seeing the announcement of large projects linked to the RIGI, to this new law. Thank you, Paula. We keep on going with Sergio now. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. It is a pleasure for us to be here at this seminar organized by the Argentine agency, basically to articulate both the private and public sector in the search for investments that are key for the development of the economy of this country. There are key sectors. If I had to talk about this RIGI in 2 words, then I would say it is one of the most ambitious and bold that were approved by Congress in the last decades. And this is because it offers a range of benefits fiscal, tax, and customs, but also because it provides legal certainty and security. We're talking about the two sides of one coin. We have on the one hand the fiscal, tax, and exchange rate benefits, and on the other hand, they should be relying on legal security. One without the other is not possible. Like Secretary Kirchner was saying, the Argentine history precedes, and thus we need to create the guarantees that are needed to make these projects viable. Like Paula was saying, regarding the fiscal benefits, which I will mention, I will tell you that the regime proposes a kind of tax reform at a low scale. Pablo Kirchner was saying that the intention that these benefits can extrapolate to the whole aspect of companies because of a logic, this cannot be done today. But we start with the RIGI. At this low scale, we see a tax reform. All taxpayers that are here today will wish to have these benefits for your companies. But because of a macroeconomic context, this cannot be achieved today. But yes, to those projects that adhere to the RIGI, the first benefit is the income tax. The quota is reduced to 25%. Today is at 35%. There's a 10% reduction. But also we have an adjustment of losses, which is very controversial today to the rest of the taxpayers, and it allows the usage of losses. The losses today can be used in the first 5 years. The taxpayers in the RIGI, they can use this adjusted by inflation throughout the whole life of the project. And if they have losses after 5 years, they can transfer them to third parties. That is quite novelty. So that can be sold to a third party at a discount, of course. Of course, there are accelerated amortization and other benefits that are less important, but important as well. But I would like to pay attention to the VAT, the value added tax. This is another innovative beneficial. The SVP, the VPU, which is the single project vehicle, will allow to pay suppliers the VAT with a fiscal debit certificate. The vehicle, the VPU, won't need to use cash to pay the suppliers. They will issue a certificate of paper. Therefore, the capital of the project will not suffer the accumulation of money here. What the minister mentioned is the liquefaction, the liquefied gas plant of Malaysia. The $10 billion will be the return, and then they will start exporting. So the RIGI, those 10 billion will not be financed by the state, but the plant will pay the suppliers. What do the suppliers do? Well, they present it as a tax against the VAT or other national taxes. So the RIGI will extend throughout the whole economy in all that value chain of the economy, because the SMEs that will send to the RIGI, they will receive these certificates and they will have to apply them with the taxes. The tax to debits and credits, as you well know, we suffer the tax every time we issue a check or we pay through our current account. Now that cannot be accredited, only just a very few parts. Now for the RIGI taxpayers, that one can be accredited to the income tax. That allows the return of the project to be larger. Then export and import duties are exempted foreign exchange freedom, and all of these through a legal stability system. I will not spoil Camila. Camila will explain further, but stability means regulatory stability of the rules that are in force at the moment of the RIGI. Then Camila will explain a little bit further on this point, but I will not extend myself, but I think we do have the menu. I think we have proper fiscal benefits and we have proper guarantees, legal guarantees. Let us hope that Argentina's past does not condition its future. So thank you very much.
Gracias, Sergio.
Thank you, Sergio. And we will now go to Alejandro Perenstein. Hi, how are you? Well, thank you first for your invitation. I'm also happy to be here to talk about this at this point. Well, 9 months ago, this was unthinkable. So the opportunity to have this issue on the table at this moment is amazing. We see potential investors, the things they are planning to do. And it's been many years since we last heard something like this. So we hope this materializes. While referring to what Pablo said about our past history, one of the first questions that we are asked is, what's the difference between this promotion regime and other promotion regimes? People who have been who have sustained damage within the context of other promotion regimes. So this question is asked over and over again. And in fact, there are some differences that are subtle in terms of the drafting, and perhaps they are not on the surface of what is actually seen, but are quite significant. One of these things is the fact that the regime falls inside the constitution. The law says states expressly that all projects that adhere to the regime are considered to be strategic and fundamental regimes for the progress of the country, and that has actual constitutional protection. When it refers to potential changes, what happens if we leave? What happens if the other guys come back? So if there are potential rules that might not abrogate, but perhaps damage the stability in some indirect way. But the fact that this falls under the progress article of the Constitution protects against this. There's another fact that may be subtle but has very good legal consequences, is that is the responsibility of public officials in terms of VPU, single project vehicles. If the state does not meet the deadlines or the terms of the regime, this is something that no other regime included. And partly what Sergio was saying about the legislative technique is important as well, in terms of the difference from regimes such as the regime on the total burden on the mining sector, since there is a legislative technique here where the drafting of the law includes partially a tax reform, an ad hoc tax reform inside the law, unlike a regime where the total burden was stabilized and any excess in that burden generated reimbursement system that never worked. Well, in this case, VPUs take advantage of a particular rate or a particular characteristic, such as the ability to pay VAT through certificates. And this is kind of automatic from an operational point of view that makes it not to rely on the administration in terms of reimbursements or readjustments. In a way, it's pretty automatic. And then if I can touch upon the foreign exchange aspect, the regime has basically 3 or 4 pillars that answer the first question that and through all these years, project sponsors ask, which is if they can pay dividends, if they can repay debt to abroad, if they can pay interest, and if they can repatriate investments. Well, the answer then was no, but now the regime has pretty significant characteristics. We're all waiting for the regulation that will come out soon and will shed some light on some of these issues. But what the law already includes is some benefits that are pretty important in terms of debt. There was a rule, it has a rule that whatever comes in can come out. So foreign currency that is brought to finance an investment is freely available. And if the VPU then wants to repay the debt with or pay dividends, the prior requirement was to bring it back first to Argentina. Perhaps this was not relevant in 2014, but since we continued to break things down, the terms of guarantee and stability to be able to pay abroad is quite significant. Argentina had a rule that there was an obligation to finance 60% of the cross-border debt within two-year terms on average. And to some point, this regime puts an end to that. The regime makes no discrimination for intercompany debt payments, so this could benefit the repayment of debt within the same economic group, which is the one that first is Spanish in terms of currency controls. So intercompany debt is also protected. Repatriation of investment, the same applies. Whatever comes in comes out. And there's also terms about availability in terms of strategic imports. You have a path to have a 100% refund in few years. And in terms of dividend payment, we're waiting for the regulations, but the law has a rule stating that dividends may be paid to the extent that financing and capital contributions are liquidated through the market. So here's a debt, especially in mixed funding projects where there's a portion of equity and a portion of debt, whether that portion of equity is expressed in pesos. Well, we have many questions about that. If the ability to pay dividends will be in proportion to the investment with regards to cross-border debt and local funding. Thank you, Alejandro. We'll now go to Camila Corbalan from Becar Valela. Thank you, Ramon. Thanks to the agency for hosting this event, and thanks to all of you present here participating. Perhaps if I can answer the question of what the RIGI is for us. Well, I think RIGI is a monument to governability, to governance. When we discussed with the agency on how we were going to address this panel, well, they asked us to say on everyday life how this impacts the administration and what questions you're being asked to put this in practice. In fact, since the new administration took office, there was a paradigm change, a full-blown paradigm change as compared to the previous administration. And we began to receive questions on investments and foreign companies that wanted to land in Argentina. But I believe that during the first part, until the enactment of the basis law, there were many concerns about governance. What can actually happen? Will we be able to implement the whole line of thought in terms of economics and politics that you're promising? So I believe that RIGI comes to make this monument to governance and credibility for the administration since the enactment of the basis law. The RIGI is a benefit regime that is in no way an exception to the law on equality of state burden. Many companies might want to have these benefits and they don't, but this is an incentive regime that is based on the progress article of the Argentine Constitution so as to promote progress and the need for investment. On the other hand, what I believe is quite important about this regime is that there are many countries with promotion regime. We can take minerals out of many countries, but the plus here is the benefit plus the legal certainty established by the regime. I would like to tell you an anecdote. since this administration took office, questions have changed radically in terms of legal advice on questions to they changed to questions. Will I be able to go to Argentina? Can I take my money out? All these questions that investors ask. And what was interesting is that we were working with a large German company and we were answering all these questions, always betting on Argentina, but giving advice based on what was actually happening. And on one day they were all concerned and called us. And what happened with the May Pact? And it was we were astonished because we couldn't believe that the May Pact was being followed so closely abroad. Because apart from its importance, because of the principles it sets, we believed it would not be known by the international community. But that was not the case. Every single landmark that took place drew the attention of the international community. And I would like to tell. I thought it was fun to tell you this anecdote because what is happening here and in the media and otherwise and in other places is having a huge impact internationally. So I believe that the passage of the RIGI provides more credibility. Well, thank you, Camila, Jacqueline. Well, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here as well. And in terms of the question about what the RIGI means for us, well, we understand we got it at a very necessary moment in time. It makes projects that would otherwise be unviable viable, and it is focused on sectors that have a lot of potential in Argentina that can become huge actors at global level. So we believe it's a very ambitious project, and we are convinced that this is the right time and it's the proper moment for it. So I will tell you briefly who may apply for this regime, which are the 8 sectors defined, which are forestry, mining, oil and gas, energy, infrastructure, metalworking, technology, and tourism. These are the 8 sectors included, and those who can apply are VPU, which are single project vehicles. These single project vehicles have to own one or more phases of a project that qualifies as a large investment. And they may not engage in other activities. They have to deal exclusively with these projects. These VPUs may be corporations, limited liability companies, single person companies, a dedicated branch, a branch of a foreign company. They may be joint ventures or other partnership agreements. And then the RIGI defines large investments, and it says that there are projects where an investment is made on assets that have certain requirements. Those assets have to be assets in which the investment amounts from $200 million to $900 million, and they have to meet other conditions, which are between the first and the second year, 40% of that minimum investment must be made. And on the other hand, they must be long-term investments, which is what we are looking for here. And to define long-term, we set a ratio which considers the present value of the cash flow without considering investments versus the present value of investments. That ratio cannot be higher than 30%, and that provides this defines whether it's a long-term investment or not. This is a general view. Then we have a more specific regime for strategic export regimes that are long-term, where what defines a new global supplier, long-term supplier, which requires larger investments. But in general, this is the scope of the RIGI. Okay, thank you very much, Jacqueline. And we will now go to the first question for Paula. which are the key sectors for this regime, and how do you think the request for adhesion will be over time? Well, with respect to the sectors, as Jackie just said, the law is pretty broad in terms of the sectors and industries it covers. But in my opinion is that the key sectors among those will be oil and gas, energy, and mining. As a matter of fact, as you may all have heard, there were announcements on oil and gas with YPF and Petronas or copper in San Juan. And in terms of investment, in my view, and based on my own professional experience, lithium is a sector and industry that has enormous potential, as everything is remains to be done yet. Everything is in the making. Participating in transactions relating to lithium. And in fact, even though there are some projects in place and foreign companies that are developing projects, there are vast areas of land that remain unexploited and at maximum are at the exploration phase. So there is huge potential there, especially considering that lithium is key at a global level as a raw material. So with respect to the sectors, this is what I see. Energy also, specifically renewable energy, which is a world trend right now. The world is transitioning from dirty energy, let's say, to clean energy and more sustainable energy. And with respect to requests for adhesion, I believe that once the regulation on the law is passed and trust from investors in this law is consolidated, then the potential, the flow of projects that will fall under the regime will be quite significant, especially as it relates to what the law defines as strategic projects, which are the projects that require investments of over $1 billion. So that's my view. Thank you, Paula. Sergio, what aspects need to be taken into account in terms of structuring the project? Well, this is a key issue, actually, because as Jackie said, the beneficiary of the regime is a legal entity, the VPU. So the VPU needs to engage in a single activity, a specific activity, which is a project that will adhere to the regime. So we have to isolate assets and liabilities within that legal entity. And we know that isolating assets and liabilities means transferring assets and liabilities to a different legal entity. This generally is taxed. So the regime has certain provisions that make it possible for the transfer of these assets within the VPU will not be taxed. The use of the reorganization of tax, the allocation to dedicated branches, which is pretty technical, but all in all, the structuring of the VPU, it will be key. We need not only have the investment plan, which has to be submitted to the authority, but the new vehicle has to be structured. It will be a new company that will have a mix of equity and debt, as Alejandro said. And so how much of the equity and how much of its own equity and how much of third-party equity will be used for financing the project, because projects are not made with one's own funds only. And so the debt, the fiscal effects of debt, the effects of the project going forward will set up the tax structuring, which is quite important to be constructed in parallel with the investment plan. Thank you, Sergio. Now, Alejandro, how does an improvement in the general regime, a removal of control limits of currency controls, come into play with the return of severe controls. Well, here comes the stabilization plan, and there are two relevant things here. The law says that if the general regime is more beneficial, the VPU will benefit from the more general regime, and so the baseline here means that, well, the law gives will never be below what they are actually being given by the RIGI now. So if the general regime improves, then the projects will benefit from it, and otherwise they will continue with what they are given by the RIGI. Camila, what's the legal certainty of the RIGI? Can you tell us about the famous stability? Well, thank you. Thank you, Ramon, for your question. I believe since the event began, we heard legal certainty over and over again. Everyone mentioned it. And so I believe this question is essential because promotion regime without legal certainty is of no use at all. So vested rights and vested benefits and incentives, if they don't have some protection on some, then they are of no use, because the question asked by the Secretary of Finance was valid. What happens if the administration changes? Because the promotion regime is very nice, but if a different administration with other ideas comes, what happens with all these vested benefits? As Alejandro said, this regime is different from other promotion regimes and actually corrects the stability issue by setting a particular condition for this promotion regime, and specifically what it does is makes the legal system applied in this regime fixed in a way they are guaranteed. And I want to make a disclaimer here because obviously I'm a lawyer after all, and we may have another discussion in some years. These guarantees, these protections may have an exit if there is an extraordinary situation in our country and we have an economic emergency law. Well, that law might suspend for a given term this regime. This should not be the case because the stability regime is provided for. But I need to say this anyway as a disclaimer. But I believe that all of us in the private sector know about this. So what's the difference between the stability in this regime and others? Well, on the one hand, from the very first provision that sets up the regulation, the promotion regime, the first three articles talk about legal certainty and security, which speaks of the aim of the regime and the importance it gives to the protection of these rights. And it has a specific chapter which deals with stability in particular. The stability relates to the tax, custom, and foreign exchange benefits, which are the benefits actually granted by the regime. So what it says, this chapter, is that any law that might abrogate the promotion regime or any law that might harm vested rights will have no effects and will be null and void. And it also has a pretty useful scheme in terms of the burden of proof, which it might be a bit technical in legal terms, but might be interesting for adhering companies because it transfers the burden of proof to the state. It's not the private sector that must prove that it's not breaching or that the tax is more harmful, but the other way around. And as a Secretary of Finance, it gives a vested right and a right to property over those rights, and the right to oppose to any law that is more detrimental. So we believe that this regime, that it has guarantees and protection, in a way, kind of protects this VPU, which is a unique concept which we did not know about, and which was created by the regime. And these vested rights are rights that become property. So I believe that's the difference between this regime that, apart from the tax incentives, the custom incentives, and the foreign exchange incentives, gives a legal certainty plus which has a duration of 30 years, which is what all speakers discussed about the large investment and the durability of the life of these projects. Thank you, Camila. And Jacqueline, what are the requirements to be taken into account in filing a request for adhesion? When you file the request, you present it out together with the investment plan. They both have to be approved. And what the regime requires is, well, it has two large concepts. On the one side, the description of the project that is being presented, the location, the sector, the amount, the schedule for the investments, and also how it will be funded, which is through the VPU, what assets will be invested in, and that's a description of the project. And then it also requires surveys and studies that are more specific, some of which are addressed in a specific chapter for the local market. For instance, you have to file an affidavit that the VPU will not distort the local market, and you have to show details on the unemployment, on direct and indirect employment, including local employment. You have to have also local suppliers, and it is stated that 20% of the investment in suppliers must be made in local suppliers. Then you have 2% other studies and or analysis, such as an estimate of imports and exports throughout the life of the project, the trade balance, and the foreign currency flow for the first 3 years, and a feasibility, a technical, financial feasibility plan, and a risk matrix and the mitigation of risks must be presented, as well as an independent economist evaluation report, plus the required licenses for the VPU. Thank you, Jacqueline. Paula, what is the impact on suppliers of adherent projects? Well, at the beginning of the talk, I talked about the RIGI from the point of view of the investor. Now I will focus on the supplier point of view, and I will refer to three issues. On the one hand, competitiveness. On the other, the impact on the flow of the supplier's own funds, and third, the chain value. In terms of competitiveness, as Jackie said, the law provides that at least 20% of the investment must be local. However, this is the raw materials or the services provided by local suppliers need to have the same conditions of quality and price as an international supplier. So it generates, it gives an incentive to local suppliers to improve competitiveness in terms of equity, in addition to the demand for goods and services generated by these projects. Suppliers can adhere to the benefit of duty exemptions, which is set for investment projects. And with regards to the value chain, well, I think this is the most relevant and the most important part, as far as suppliers are concerned, because as the foreign minister said at first, these large projects not only require inputs for the project in itself, but they require a huge structure, a complementary structure that involves other industries so as to operate properly. I mean, supplying water, road infrastructure, food, housing, among others. And as an example, we can see in Vaca Muerta, the Danielo case. Danielo began as a small project and began to grow, and then a whole town, a whole city was built relating to the Vaca Muerta project, because since the project needs workforce, the workforce has its own needs that well need to be met for to sustain the project and for the project to work. So what this generates is indirect employment or jobs, which is another one of the benefits that the RIGI brings. And I would like to add one more thing, which I see as a collateral effect of the law in this regard, and that is that the law promotes or will promote the development of the merger and acquisition market. And I'm saying this because the law makes it possible for, as part of the project, for the VPU as part of the project, to buy parts of businesses or companies that relate to the purpose of the project. So I believe there will be a collateral effect in this sense that will contribute to the development of this market, which to this moment at this moment is at a low point, and there is this trend of the of international players leaving the market. So this is what I see in terms of suppliers, and what I think is that from me, you should take this idea that it makes long-term strategic plans viable, which are fundamental for the development of the potential, of the realization of the potential of our country, which are not feasible under the current macroeconomic conditions, but under this law are once again viable, and we believe this will have a strong impact on our economy. Thank you, Paula. Sergio, what professional teams are needed? Well, this seems to be an operational question. In fact, it doesn't, but we believe it's important to address it because, as Jackie said, the first milestone is the submission of the investment plan and the to the implementation authority, so as to get the authorization. Because in order to execute that investment plan, we need the participation of many parties. The company, of course, the home office, if it is a foreign company, lawyers, accountants, economists, banks that will lend money. All of this coordination, interaction, articulation of professionals needs to be coordinated so as to avoid a postponement of the investment plan. So in these works where you have an actual deadline when you need to present an investment plan, we need to apply project management methods. Each party has to be responsible for their own work, and they have to know when their input will be applied to the investment plan, so that it will all converge on the point when the company submits the investment plan. In addition, the date when the plan is presented is the date when the rights and guarantees begin to operate. You need the authorization then, but the authorization is retroactive to the date of submission of the plan. So if I get delayed in submitting the plan because I couldn't coordinate the parties, then I will also postpone the rights and guarantees. But it is key to coordinate the project properly so as to present the plan and get the authorization in a timely fashion. Now, Alejandro, what's the benefit in terms of exports in addition to the free availability of currency? Well, the free availability, as the law is drafted, shows our guilt over our past history. It repeats itself by saying free availability 8 times in the first 3 sections. The law only has a safeguard or disclaimer with respect to the possibility of regulators to set prioritization rules, something that happens with the rule on $100 million of liquid assets, which says that you have to use them before accessing the market. So what the law states is that the regulator can set this type of rules. We are waiting for the regulation, but we assume there will be something along this line. And from the perspective of the other issues, what, as I was saying, there is no quantitative limit on dividends, and we're waiting on the regulation about the proportionality as regards the funding of the project. Thank you, Alejandro. Camila? Is there a dispute settlement regime provided for? And specifically, in what terms does it refer to arbitration? Thank you, Ramon, for your question. Once again, this has to do with the legal certainty of the investment promotion regime, because this regime sets forth a specific dispute settlement mechanism that is designed to provide legal certainty to the VPU and to provide impartiality on the side of the Argentine state. And what it specifically states is that in the face of any dispute between the state and the VPU that has adhered to the regime, whether through the use, enjoyment of the rights, or whatever the nature of the dispute may be, well, the first step is an amicable solution phase or instance. It's funny because I was asking myself, how do you settle a dispute amicably? Well, the idea of the lawmaker was positive. We will set up a term for the parties to reach an agreement, which is 60 days. And if that is not the case, then that's all the better for us, the lawyers. And it will be settled through arbitration. Arbitration here brings impartiality. The arbitration and the place where it will be conducted will be decided on by the VPU, and it also adds certain specifications that are quite interesting, such as the fact that the seat of the arbitration cannot be Argentina, which brings even more impartiality, that there will be 3 arbitrators, and none of those arbitrators may be an Argentine national. So as we may see, there are certain added provisions in the regime that will provide legal certainty to the VPU, that will adhere to the regime and will provide it with some protection. However, the rule has a small addition. I wouldn't say a small lettering, but it may go unnoticed, which says, regardless of the arbitration principle, any VPU that adhering to the regime can negotiate with the state another dispute settlement mechanism, which gives some freedom for the VPU to have the possibility of using another methodology if they don't want to use the one provided for. But I believe that what's positive in terms of the arbitration is that it comes to bring or try to bring more impartiality and legal certainty to the regime. Thank you, Camila. Jacqueline, what do we need to take into account in investment plans? Well, to develop a good investment plan, it has to be solid and comprehensive. It has to seek the return and viability of the project, which we believe has to be can be achieved through the RIGI. We also need to take into account that this investment plan might be presented to other stakeholders, such as financial entities, and we have to have a number of general criteria into account in order to prepare it. First, the macroeconomic and industry analysis. In terms of the macroeconomic analysis, we need to understand what the expected evolution of the macroeconomic variables of Argentina will be, such as inflation, exchange rate, devaluation, and also understand the current sovereign risk and how we can mitigate this through this regime. and we need to understand what demand and supply is in terms of the industry, where we see there's huge demand for these sectors at global level, understand the competitive positioning of the project and the market potential for the project. Also, we need to take into account environmental issues. If we need environmental licenses, what's the effect of that? And also the what is known as social licenses. Another issue is financing. You need to evaluate the possible sources of funding. If you go to a funding entity, to a private equity fund, or a project finance, if you pay with a flow generated through the project, or a corporate finance project. And then we need to break this down for the specific project by building the future income, the cost, the expenses, the capex investments based on the RIGI requirements, the investment in a working capital, the key requirements for this project. And all this information is translated into a financial model that will reflect all these variables, taking into account the fiscal incentives mentioned and the accounting issues that might be relevant. And then we need to analyze the variables that are seen as key for the profitability of the project, and the sensitivity analysis, where we see the key variables and what the impact would be if these variables were to change, and if the project will remain viable in that case. Thank you, Jacqueline. We will now take some questions from the audience. I will go for the first. My question relates to large projects, large ongoing projects that involve over $500 million in total. And since it's a fast execution project, but stage project, it provides for it contemplates an investment that will soon reach $200 million. Will these projects be included in the regulation? How should these projects be implemented? In many cases, they refer to businesses where there is a single business unit. And third, how will the invoicing be implemented through the VPU that will have to be issued to the main company that owns the activity? I will take that. That is a question by someone who knows what they are asking. That seems a challenge at this stage, but the law is not clear. However, I believe that the ambiguity favors, and this will have to be cleared up by the regulation, but it favors ongoing projects, what is known as brownfields. Greenfields are the projects that are just beginning, and brownfields are ongoing projects. The way the law is structured, it seems that ongoing projects, if they need additional investments, increasing, amounting to more than 200 investments, well, they may adhere to the regime. Well, this is my answer to the first question. And the second question is, if I have a company that has a mining project, a single mining project, for example, but I need to add over $200 million to extend this project or develop this project, then should I isolate part of the project in a dedicated branch, or can I make the company be a VPU? That is a question that we have been asked by many investors, especially in the mining sector, and I believe that the decree will clear this up. I believe that the way the law is structured, we need to isolate these assets through a VPU based on how the law is currently drafted, except if the decree states otherwise. Since the law makes it a requirement for the VPU to have exclusive activities, companies in general have other activities. By definition, they can lend money, they can get money from other activities. So I believe that the mandatory nature of the exclusive activity makes it a requirement for the assets to be isolated through a VPU. This will not generate additional cost because the isolation is provided for under the VPU, but I believe that we will not be able to take the company as a whole as a VPU. And then in terms of invoicing, well, the dedicated branch that is the most important element here will have their own taxpayer identity number. So the dedicated branch will be used as a single company, and they will have to issue their invoices for the business to third parties. And I would like to add, Ramon, that, well, we haven't mentioned this yet. Why does the regime create a VPU and is quite insistent on its single activity being this large investment project? Well, we don't have the answer yet because it has to be provided for in the regulation, but I agree with Sergio. The issue here that the activity needs to be a single activity has an explanation, which is quite interesting, and it's to bring foreseeability of what's happening and control to the state. We say, we're going to give you these benefits and incentives, and I'm going to give them to this company, not the whole business group, so that you may exchange these benefits between the companies, because this is positive for the company because it is a legal positive way of controlling the use of these incentives, which, as we said at the beginning, are necessary in Argentina, but are an exception to the principle of equal public burden. Well, there are many questions on retroactivity. For instance, will RIGI benefits apply to investments already made in the country? For instance, investments made already in the mining sector, or will it apply only to new investments? Well, the ability to use investments for assets applies from the enactment of the law. The ability to apply them to investments is limited to after the enactment of the law. So you have a timeline there, which means that you can only apply it to investments that come after that, and the investment plan would have to state why it should be used for a new investment should be used for adhering to the regime. I don't know if we have the time to continue. I have a specific English question on the issue of foreign exchange. Oh, that's a difficult question. I don't know if anyone will want to add something. Once again, we're waiting for the regulation for the law to set the basis, and that basis so far is for debt. The law as it is drafted is a protection because the funds from any cross-border debt, including with related companies, if it has been brought to Argentina through the foreign exchange market, it will have access in proportion to the capital increased and without a limit for interests. And in terms of dividends, where the huge question mark is placed, the rule expressly provides that they have access to the extent that they have entered capital contributions or debt from abroad. And there's a question of whether this is mixed between equity and debt, and also if it's cross-border or if it's done in pesos. The regulation will have to state something on this, because otherwise you could use cross-border debt with 50% of the investment and then take out all of the dividends. So we'll need to see what the regulation states, but in principle, the baseline for VPUs in foreign exchange terms is above the general regime because of these issues. So this refers to the free availability of experts. And I would like to add something. And when we talk about stability in foreign exchange benefits, the only exception to this is the foreign exchange rate. If the foreign exchange rate changes, then it will depend on that. That is not actually provided for. And to close this, there are many questions on oil and gas and mining, but I have another question on tourism. Will infrastructure investments such as transport routes, low-cost airlines be included? Well, I think that more than tourism, that refers to infrastructure, but of course, this needs to be clarified in the decree. But if it's mentioned on the infrastructure sector, this involves all that has to do with ports, airports, routes, and all infrastructure investments. With tourism, what I see is, well, perhaps airports, tourist centers, ski centers, those kinds of issues, I believe, should fall under tourism. And of course, anything that has to do with platforms. And I refer to technological tourist platforms to the extent that they require a significant investment. Okay, so I thank you all for taking part in this. This seems like a whole different country. We're speaking about the RIGI. We could not think of this a year ago. Now we have fiscal and financial and trade surplus, and we're talking about the RIGI regime. This is a huge incentive for all of us. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, to close this event, the Undersecretary for Promotion of Education, Investments and Trade, Mr. Ramiro Ochoso, will make a statement. Well, I believe everything has already been said. I would like to thank the speakers for their participation. Thank you, Ramon, for acting as mediator. Other law and accounting firms have been present here today. We're already talking with the agency about hosting a new event, taking into account that the regulations are about to be passed, and we will invite other firms to share with their experience and knowledge. I would like to thank ambassadors, foreign diplomats, and representatives of productive sectors, companies, chambers, and associations that have participated in this event. Also, those who have participated online from different parts of the world. Thanks for the dissemination of our embassies and consulates abroad. And also the Argentine Agency for Investments and International Trade for their joint work to organize this event. The addresses today make it possible for us to understand more deeply the scope of this regime. The RIGI will make it possible to boost long-term investments in key sectors of our economy, such as those mentioned previously. This activity is part of the many actions that we're carrying out at the Foreign Ministry to promote our exports and to promote foreign direct investment in our country. Thank you very much once again, and have a very good day. We thank you for your presence and the over 250 people who have joined us online. We wish you a good afternoon.